Shabbat Shalom. As Governor Malloy has proclaimed today a day of mourning for the 26 victims of the massacre at Newtown, we too take this opportunity to mourn and to reflect. We gather today in the comfort of our community, a community filled with good and kind people. And in truth, it is impossible for us to fully comprehend the depths of the sorrow, the extent of the loss, or the nature of the evil that descended on our neighbors. For those of us who are parents, we know that parenthood is a contract with fear. We deposit all that we have into our children, and we are reminded daily how vulnerable we are. Talmudic rabbis speak of Yesurei Ahava, the sufferings of love. From the first time we hold our babies in our arms in their first moments of life, we experience a kind of anxiety that gnaws at our very being and tempers our exhilaration. We look straight into the eyes of human innocence and purity in its most basic form, laying there between our shoulders and our palm, and along with all of the future milestones that we imagine, birthdays, graduations, accomplishments, recognition, we also envision the pitfalls and disappointments that our child will endure, the failures, the slings and arrows, the taunting and teasing, the disillusionment, the inevitable losses, and the dangers lurking at every turn. And yet, we proceed nonetheless headlong, believing that the road is worth taking. It is a miraculous attribute of human beings, this commitment to life and to the future, despite the risk. Our sages were adamant. Children constitute the most eloquent affirmation of faith that life is precious and worth sharing with others. To look at a newborn, your newborn, is to experience the miracle of creation in its most elementary state and to commit to the principle that each generation can bring the human race that much closer to peace and tranquility. What does the murder of 20 of our most precious and vulnerable creations, flesh of our flesh and bone of our bone, and 6 of the teachers who loved them and laid down their lives to shield them, literally, what does it tell us about ourselves? What does it tell us about our society? That we cannot even protect our children. What does it say about an America that can be so good, so concerned with the rights and dignity of the individual, and so compassionate and charitable, but at the same time is so obsessed with guns and violence, and somehow considers an assault rifle to be a fundamental constitutional right? What does it say about us? We know that so many of the arguments promoting assault rifles defy reason and common sense. We know that they are all rationalization and excuses for profit and self-interest. We know that the framers of our Constitution could not imagine and did not intend for the right to bear arms to include assault rifles and machine guns openly brought into schools, cinemas, malls, houses of worship, or any other public place. What does it say about us that we so cavalierly go on with our lives in willful or benign blindness to the devastation we tolerate? 30,000 Americans a year are murdered by gun violence, 80 people a day. Today, 80 Americans were murdered by people with guns. I worry that we have become desensitized, that we consider this violence to be the normal state of affairs. We know that the slogan, "Guns don't kill, people do," is obscene. We know that. Do we not take dangerous vehicles off the road? And why are we so insistent to prevent an alcoholic from driving a car, but are so lax when it comes to preventing a murderer from handling a gun? And we allow these people the most lethal of weapons as some kind of fundamental American right. Cranes don't kill, people do, but do we not regulate the use of cranes because of their potential lethality and ensure that crane operators are working as safely as possible? Guns make it possible to kill people, and the more lethal is the gun, the more people will be killed. This is what assault rifles are for. I spent 3 years in the military with an M16 practically attached to me. I trained with it. I slept with it. It had one purpose that was pounded into us over and over again: fire to kill as many people as you can. And does this gun epidemic not limit our freedom? When we cannot even go to the movies or the shopping malls or to school without worrying that someone who is legally carrying an assault rifle will commit atrocities? They say they are about freedom, but what are they talking about? We are creating a society that is less free, where danger lurks around every corner. With every massacre, we die a little. A little enjoyment, a little pleasure, and a little freedom are removed from the American soul and the soil of this blessed land. And what is their solution? More guns. Arm the teachers. Arm the civilians. Arm everyone in sight. What does the massacre of 20 children and 6 teachers who loved them say about our political representatives, who cower behind the fear of political retribution, abandoning their most basic responsibility to protect us and shield our children from harm? What does it say about them that they are more concerned about their own personal future than the future of our children? What does the murder of 20 children and 6 teachers who loved them tell us about our religious leaders, who assure us that such massacres occurs because we have banished prayer from the public schools, and that we have sinned because of our tolerance of gay marriage and commitment to science? There is darkness in the human soul. We are creatures that kill our young. We cause so much suffering to each other. Judaism teaches us 2 responses. First, work ceaselessly to create a better society, a more just, tolerant, kind, generous, and compassionate society, where weapons of war are converted into instruments of peace and productivity. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. We do this through policies, laws, regulations, and justice. It is why we cannot avoid politics, because politics is the way we make policies. No religion worth its weight in salt can claim to be apolitical. We may be nonpartisan, but we cannot be unconcerned with policies. Such a claim is unworthy and unacceptable. Religion is about values and justice, goodness, and compassion. And when we see elements of our society that are unjust and not good and not compassionate, we must respond. If we do not, we forfeit our claim to respect and relevance, and worse, we would then leave politics to politicians and to interest groups whose purpose fundamentally differs from our own. We are taught in Jewish tradition that even to take one life wrongfully is akin to destroying the entire universe. If so, we have not only the right, we have the obligation to do what we can to right wrongs and to repair the breach. We will be increasing our efforts here at Stephen Wise to lobby for sensible gun laws. We realize that this is not the only dimension of the complicated problem, but it is a key dimension. We will ask you to consider joining us in our devotion to restore America to America and to preserve that unique American freedom of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, protected from those who are intent on taking life, liberty, and happiness, or who enable those who have these aims. The second Jewish response is to bring light to darkness. When we look at a 6-year-old child, we can see the best of us reflected in them. We see ourselves in them before the shadows darkened in our own hearts. We are reminded of what is inside of us: goodness, compassion, dependency on others, joy, and a certain lightness of being. We are reminded of the miracle of life. And when we learned of those Connecticut teachers, we were reminded of that which we so often take for granted. There is heroism in us. There is courage in us. There is love in us, not only of self and not only of our children, but of other people's children. All week I couldn't help but think of our own teachers here. Altogether, we have close to 500 youngsters in our schools. What we have learned about Connecticut teachers is true of most teachers, including ours. They love their children as their own. They value them. They respect them. They worry about them. They protect them like their own. We forget. For most teachers, it is not only a job. It's a calling, a labor of love, a commitment to the best of human qualities, a desire to educate the next generation so that that generation will be better than our generation. These teachers are heroes. When you see them every day, you cannot help but marvel at the strength of their convictions. There is goodness in us. Judaism is emphatic. Bring that goodness to others. And when we see a good deed, some kindness, some act of generosity, we sense the presence of God. Even in the darkest of days of the 20th century, when that monstrous war machine slaughtered thousands of children every single day, still, there were good people who loved them and protected them in the face of enormous risk of terrible retribution. There are many who are alive today because of some act of kindness and generosity granted them or their parents when they were children long ago. The Jewish people is alive today because of those two midwives that we read about in the Bible who saved the firstborn from Pharaoh's murderous decrees. This is how we bring heaven to earth. It is when we bring healing that we affirm the healing God. It is when we practice compassion that we invoke the compassionate God. It is when we offer mercy that we summon the merciful God. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin into his nest again, I shall not live in vain. And I would say this final word to those who lost loved ones. We have learned to measure life's worth not by how long we live. Some of us will die old, completely used up, helpless and dependent, and some of us will die young. Some of us will die from natural causes, and some of us will die tragically. The biblical Job cried out upon the death of his children, "That which I feared has come upon me." I say to those surviving parents, siblings, relatives, and friends who are experiencing such deep grief, that which you have feared has come upon you. But know that your loved ones did not live in vain, nor did they die in vain. Summer sang in them, if only for a brief season. They brought joy and comfort to so many. They taught you and the rest of us how to live. You are better for having them in your lives, and the world is a better place for their being part of our lives. We have been inspired by them. They have reminded us to affirm life and never to cease affirming life. We will remember them and act because of them. To be remembered for good and to be inspired is our means of vanquishing death. It is our way of bearing witness for those whose physical presence is no longer with us. And I would say to these loved ones, for you today, it is dark in the sunshine and difficult to see. But know that your loved ones have brought light into the dark corners of our world. And there will come a day, not today, but at some point, that summer will beckon for you, and its soothing warmth will free you from the bracing winds and the bitter cold. If it is any consolation, know that an entire nation mourns with you. And we pray that one day the sun will rise again for you. As we read in the Bible, the Sun of righteousness and goodness will one day rise to bring healing in its wings. Amen.